if you don't feel really, really intensely attached to what you're trying to do, if you don't think you're putting a star out in the universe and contributing to the world at large, you might want to question why you're doing it. But also, too, be gentle with yourself. This is a crazy business. It's a crazy process. Be gentle and kind to yourself. Accept that you're going to fail over and over again, and that's okay.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Epiphany Off the Cuff. My name is Rick Meekins. I'm going to be your host. Before we get into it, don't forget to like and subscribe, hit that bell so you can make sure you get all the updates as we're dropping them. Today, of course, we have our co-host Hazel. Hazel, how are you?
I'm good, Rick. How are you?
I'm doing great. Hazel, you know you're doing amazing. I know that you are. But you know what? Let's not mince words here today, right?
I know.
Today we are joined in the studio by Tim and Kelly of Seirios Technologies. How are you guys?
Great.
Doing well, thanks.
All right, let's do a little bit more than that. How are you guys?
We're fabulous. We're great to be here. It's great to be here.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us. Today we're going to talk about operations. We're going to talk about tech startups, of course, but we want to talk about the operations that happens behind that, because, it's great to go out, it's great to build an app and that sort of thing, but, we want to have a business. We want to be able to sustain. And so they're going to bring their expertise to give us some guidance and some wisdom behind, what it takes to do that. So, Kelly, before I go off on some long monologue, would you please introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Kelly Flynn. I'm the CEO and one of the co-founders of Seirios Technologies. I've got about 25 years working in technology, what I like to call engineering adjacent, which is to say my focus is on process product, but also too just helping people figure out what they're doing and why they're doing it and what to go forward with.
Awesome. Thank you. And Tim, would you do the same, sir?
Yeah, absolutely. So I come from a software engineering background, then kind of a traditional path there with a computer science background, and I was also a co-founder of Seirios and over 20 years now in technology, from individual developer up to CTO. Worked through several startups and acquisitions and large enterprises. It's been a lot of fun.
Awesome. Thanks so much. And you guys together, you run Seirios Technologies. So I think it's important to let our guests know a little bit about that.
Sure. Seirios Technologies was founded because both Tim and I are long-term startup veterans, and we really looked at everything that was been equipped for us between management companies and development companies and basic business services, and we figured out there were a lot of things we didn't like about it. One of the things we didn't like about it: long-term contracts, long-term consultants, very expensive, and there was no complete solution. There was no holistic perspective. So when we created Seirios Technologies 2 years ago, what we decided to do is do everything that wasn't. So we created Seirios to be very startup friendly. Our clients are all super early stage startups, so the proverbial founder in a garage, all the way up to about 20 employees, maybe a Series A. So we really work with a super early stage that a lot of people don't work with because it's high risk, because it requires a lot of adjustment to your model and your pricing, and it's a lot of work. It's a lot of hand-holding. So we created basically a bespoke company. Every startup we look at is unique, and we really want to make sure that we address their unique capabilities. That's everything from how they work to how they function to how they get to the future. So we basically work at 3 different levels, and our clients come in and out of those to whatever we want they do. We really try to meet them where they're at, rather than having them meet us where we're at. So our first stage is we actually work with founder coaching. It's a little bit of mentoring, it's a little bit of advisement, but it's really kind of coaching them from a holistic perspective on what it's like to be a founder. Being a founder is a crazy life. It's a lot of balance. A lot of people are working while they're actually founding another company. A lot of them don't have technology experience. They just have a really cool idea and a really cool problem they want to solve. But getting there is a challenge. And it's not just how do you build a company and how do you start a startup and what are all the things you need to consider, but it's also how do you sleep at night? How do you balance your family? How do you make sure you take a mental break and relax and do whatever it is for you to actually have that full life? We don't want founders, and founders that crash and burn are the ones who don't consider a full balance of what they do and how they do it. The second thing we do is actually product development. And this is not product development from your traditional product development company you would normally get. Again, kind of with our whole mission, we approach it holistically. So the first thing we do is actually kind of a little rough in terms of we take everything out of a founder's head and drop it on a whiteboard, either a virtual or a physical one. We take all the ideas, all the aspirations, all the things they've already worked on, all the things that they want to do in the future, the service that they want to provide, and we literally put everything onto one place so that we can start pecking through it and figuring out what's important and what's not important. The next thing we do is actually help them with develop of user personas. One of the things founders very often do in early stage companies do is they don't really detail into what their clients are. They'll say, oh, I want to service this industry, or I want to solve this person's problem, but they haven't looked at what that person really looks like. Not just from their job role, but also too, what does their personality look like? What are things that are important to them? What are the roles they play? What kind of technology aptitude they have? What are the things they want to see in this solution and this problem they're trying to solve? So we actually go through and formally document that out. It's literally filling out forms. And during this whole time, we're asking hard questions. We're not asking just the simple stuff. We're digging in. We're challenging. A lot of people say that we're very brutal and honest, and we are very, very honest and direct about how we communicate that. And that's because our founders need that. They need an external perspective. So the thing we do after that is actually create a roadmap. So it's not just looking from a technology perspective, although our clients are usually technology companies. It's not just digging into that. It's digging into when do you want to do technology? When do you want to implement what phase of the technology? When do you want to do a proof of concept? When do you want to do releases? So it's a technology aspect of it and figuring out the development, figuring out what makes sense from a staging perspective. But we also, again, approach it holistically. So we look at it not just from that perspective, but we say, okay, at what point, what inflection points are between all of those points? What point do you need to bring in things like accounting? When are you going to start doing lead generation? When are you going to start doing marketing? When are you going to deal with the legal aspects of it? All this stuff requires contracts. And in fact, one of the things we always advise founders right off the bat is sign NDAs everywhere. Non-disclosure agreements. We want to make sure those are in place from the beginning to the end if we sign those too. So we want to go ahead and figure out what inflection points everybody needs. When do you start hiring? When do you bring in co-founders if you don't already? When do you bring in executives? All those things become really important in terms of actually staging out a company. Why? So you have your effort paced, you have your financials paced. You're not trying to go ahead and spend a lot of money on development teams. We find very often that founders the first thing they'll do is hire a dev team. Not always the smartest thing, especially when you haven't figured out what the features and functionality are and how you're staging the technology. So we really make sure that we dig into that so they have a comprehensive model. One of the side effects of that that's very important is our founders are often looking for investors. They're looking to bring money into it because a lot of times they're bootstrapping. We understand that. I've bootstrapped 3 startups, including Seirios. It's a lot of work and a lot of effort. And there's a lot of financial exposure on the line from your family's finances as well as friends and family that you brought in. When you have that roadmap set up, it aligns you with what especially the financial climate is right now, the investment climate. People are no longer investing in people who have a really good idea, but don't know how to get there. They want to know, how are you going to spend our money? What are you going to spend it on? And when are you going to come back to the well, so to speak, and bring in additional investors? Partially because every investor you bring dilutes what's out there in terms of the investment pipeline. So having a roadmap like this sets you up for that. It sets you up to be able to say, I'm going to spend your money on this point and this point and this point, and this is all it's going to buy you on a vertical level, and this is how I'm going to run it. Going in there and saying you have the operational, you have the business aspects and the technology aspects all together in one place is a really strong pitch to an investor. We even have people in our network that help coach founders and team members to do public speaking. So how do you go in front of a bunch of investors and sell yourself? Investors are going to buy you first. Then they're going to buy everything else. So how do you do that? That's super challenging. A lot of people aren't great public speakers. And so that makes it really, really difficult for them to be able to get the financing again and the investments. Third things we do is we help build. So we look at it, again, taking that holistic perspective of what other elements do you need in order to build the business. If they've got them, that's great. If they don't have them, then what we do is work with a series of strategic partners, one of which is Eepiphanni, to be able to look from a technology perspective And we have technology partners on every continent other than Antarctica. So we can provide cost, time zone alignment, cultural alignment, and language alignment, depending on what our founders need. We can also go ahead and help them fill in all the business aspects of it. So we have people like Rick helping with marketing and business operations. We have companies that are in lead generation. We have companies that do website development and branding. We have lawyers. We have accountants. We have estate planners. We have people who do benefits. We even have people that help with wellness programs inside of our founders and our companies. So we really look at pulling all that in a very comprehensive manner. And we kind of sit as the nexus. We help our founders kind of manage all that manage all the stuff that's there. All the people are in one central location. We also help coordinate the collaboration. All of our partners were selected because of their ability to work cross-disciplinary. That means that we don't make a decision on the marketing side of things and keep the development in a totally isolated bucket, so to speak. Those two are integrated together. And so when the marketing decision is made, it's reflected in the application. Same with lead generation. There's a CRM. We make sure that's included in the technology aspects of it, as well as in the marketing, the lead generation. Branding is super important. A lot of companies go ahead and buy a logo, but they don't know how to brand. Again, important. Trademarking. Want to make sure all those things are trademarked, but we make sure that all those are covered so we're not making any gaps.
Yeah.
Again, that helps with building the business, building the presence, attracting new customers, but also going back to the investment perspective, your investors want to see what you're building and how you're building it. So giving them a whole package and a whole perspective, again, very much helps with aligning yourself with what's going on in the investment community. One of the things we also do is Seirios. We're kind of like Mary Poppins to an extent. We come in, we help you build, we help you get everything started, and then we go do something else. But all of our partners contract directly with our clients. And that means when we leave, they have all that infrastructure in place. They have all the relationships in place already. They have trusted partners. They have trusted people with a history of working with them. And so they go away with something that is scalable, something that is manageable. And as they grow, which we hope they do it in a managed fashion. So that's Seirios in a nutshell. A very big nutshell.
Very big nutshell.
Such extensive knowledge.
And leave everything behind in such a state that it will keep running itself.
What did you say that again, Tim?
I said our goal is to work ourselves out of a job, so that we set the company up for success and on their own, so that they can keep running with the partnerships, with the tools, with the processes that they need to be successful.
Yeah, awesome. So, and I guess digging down a little bit, at the granular level, Tim, you with the, being the, more the CTO, I've got an idea for an app, and of course, I'm going through the process and I'm starting to build, and I realize like halfway through this process that, I don't know what I'm doing. So, I mean, what do I need to do? What do I need to do? What's the first thing I think we need to do, like, from like a product development perspective?
I think you hit it right there at the end, was product development perspective. A lot of people will, as we started on the conversation, jump straight to getting a dev team and do this.
Yeah.
But without always thinking, is that what you need to do? And a lot of people have such grand ideas and they want to go straight to the goal line without thinking about what are all the milestones between. How do we get there? What do you really need from the start? And that's where the product discovery process really kicks in. Okay, it's awesome. You want to have goals. You want to have grand goals. You want to have lots of ideas, all sorts of cool stuff that you want to build that's going to change the world, right? But which ones do you need first? Which ones are going to hook the customers? Which ones help you grow, get a presence in the market? And then you need to make that splash and get initial feedback so you have that opportunity to change and adapt over time. So those first steps really need to be about discovery and understanding. You may have the long-term goals, but how do you get there? When do you start? How do you refine those goals into small increments that can be tackled and achieved? That's a big or a common problem we see with a lot of founders. They want to go straight to the end, and aren't always picking achievable goals. So you want to break it down into achievable components, and every time that you deliver something, there's an opportunity for feedback, redesign, iteration. You never know how many times you may need to pivot before you really hit the mark and make a big splash in the market.
Awesome. Kelly, myths versus reality. Yeah, I know you've had 100 conversations with 100 developers. What is it they believe and will come to you and say, hey, this is going to happen versus what actually happens or what is going to happen, a little bit down the road.
Yeah, it's always very interesting because, as Tim mentioned, we get a lot of founders that come in. The first thing they do is hire a dev team because they jump directly to technology. And there's a lot of intricacies to hiring a dev team and selecting the right one. You need to consider things like, do I have, Southeast Asia, for example, very inexpensive. But the challenge with Southeast Asia is that you've got a 9.5-hour difference to India. For example, you can't do the math in your brain and know exactly what time that looks like in India, depending on what you're doing and whether you're making them work in the middle of the night, whether you're working in the middle of the night. That's a huge challenge. There's a risk and opportunity cost associated with that. The other thing we see very often is just communication with a developer and a founder. Rick and you and I have talked about this, how there's a language there that has to happen in order to make it well. A lot of founders will send their dev team, oh, I want it to do this. But if you don't break it down in the right way, you end up with communication problems. Communication problems cost money and they cost time and the scope gets out of control. So it's really very much, selecting the right people, making sure that it's managed correctly and making sure the communication lines are the way they need to be, understanding cultural differences between various areas and various regions of the world, putting that all together, hugely challenging, especially if you're a non-technical founder or especially if you don't have technology build experience.
I think
same question to you, Tim. Myths and reality.
I think one of the points that Kelly hit on the end is, especially for non-technical founders, there's sometimes a understanding that needs to be reached of what is hard and what isn't. A lot of founders, they have a great idea. Oh, that should be easy. We'll just do this, this, and this. It's only 3 steps. But not realizing that there's a lot of complication from a process standpoint, from a data standpoint, from a security standpoint, from an infrastructure standpoint. You start thinking outside the box. It's not just a product. It's support. It's maintenance. It's stability. It's security. What are all the surrounding aspects of the product that need to be considered during the design to make sure that not only are you successful, but you're not going to get yourself in trouble from, even if that's a PR standpoint, not even a legal or liability type standpoint, but just PR. So there are a lot of aspects that founders need to consider when building an application other than just the app. So that's really kind of eye-opening, I think, for a lot of founders too. They just want to go, and this is what I want to build. And the reality is there are a lot of moving pieces that need to be put together that aren't always obvious right out of the gate.
Awesome. Thank you for that.
Curious to know, how much flexibility do you allow developers to design the technology? Like, do you check over your employees or give them free reign? Curious about that because you mentioned that there's a lot of moving pieces in there and they have the technical expertise, especially if the founder is non-technical.
First of all, we don't have employees. We have partners that we work with and they have employees. So I want to make sure that we understand that we don't do this directly. We coordinate it. We collaborate. We help kind of knit all the pieces together, but we don't have developers ourselves. So a lot of that is, dealing with cultural aspects. We use a lot in development and considering development teams, the culture and how that impacts how you work together. And so taking that into consideration, you get a whole lot different perspective on dev teams and how to build them and what's appropriate. We work with our dev teams to really keep them aligned with our collaborative nature, but also the way we approach charging for those services in terms of making sure that we're not looking at spending a lot of money that we don't have to. Founders are sensitive to different things, especially new founders. There's a trust element that goes with culture. There's a natural inclination, a leaning, even if it's just at a very visceral level. There's usually one in there. And so digging into those types of things, that helps us determine which dev teams bring to the board. The technology, the gaps in the technology help us bring which people inside of those teams are necessary. And also, too, who's a specialist in what? We have some companies, they're really design first, and they're really great at developing interfaces and then developing technology into it. The other companies, they're just straight coders. That's what they do. They code, they don't design. The designing has to happen somewhere else. So it's really variable, and we try to be very bespoke and, again, kind of meet our clients where they're at, rather than trying to enforce a paradigm on top of them.
Awesome. That's something to think about, with multiple dev teams, and just really understanding, where their strengths and weaknesses. I mean, it's completely logical, but I know sometimes, as with founders, it's just like, okay, I like these guys, you know what I mean, or whatever it is, you get that kind of well, because I like them, they should be able to do the job, sort of thing. And I know that, founders sometimes go through multiple devs, just trying to figure out, dev teams trying to just figure out, who's actually going to deliver what they say they're going to deliver. Tim, what kind of challenges do you see? I mean, we talked a little bit about language, you talked about, time zone, but, what kinds of other challenges do you see with dev teams, perhaps in general, or, whatever?
Well, so trying to do the due diligence and understand the dev teams that you were just talking about, of who's actually going to do the job properly. There are a lot of developers out there who can deliver you a result, but are they doing it well? And when you come back to the non-technical founders, you don't necessarily have someone available, especially when you've outsourced the entire development project, who can come in and say, is this sound code? Is it secure? I come back to the security part a lot. But is it expandable? At times with startups, there is a phase which is totally legitimate to say, I need to throw something together and get it to market as fast as possible. It's okay. I'll do it again later. At times, that's all right. But sometimes, especially if you're bootstrapping, you're not going to be in a position where you can just restart. And you want to make sure from the ground up that the software that's being developed is going to scale properly. That's a big one. If you're building it out at some particular infrastructure and you're good for a pilot of a few thousand users, but your goal is to hit millions of users, are you building it in a manner to support that scale in the future? And our philosophy generally is do it right the first time. And make sure that you're prepared for the growth that you anticipate in the future in terms of infrastructure and product design. I'd say that's a pretty big one of the hidden aspects on the development teams is are they building it in a manner that will support you long term, not just right away.
And to add to Tim's comments, oftentimes we get into the code and we find things with new founders like the code they have not stable, or it's not secure, or in some places we have to tell founders the really hard truth of you do realize you don't own your own code, right? Which is always kind of a shock when we explain that to them, and it's a super common pattern that we see. Non-technical founders especially don't always take the best dev teams, and they take a lot of advice from people who are early investors, from friends, family, those kinds of things. That advice can be really good and hit the nail on the head, but oftentimes it's I hired this dev team because my buddy uses them kind of thing. And again, without those communication channels opened up that we were talking about before, and knowing how to communicate between the two, you end up with this kind of inherent disaster in some ways. And it's horrible. It's horrible for us. It breaks our hearts when we see it, because it's like, this is something that is nominally somewhat preventable, but it's a very common first step for founders to get themselves into that situation. And so one of the things we do is help untangle that. Tim's really great. He's fabulous at reading code and seeing what's in there. And we do have people in our network that if we don't know it and Tim doesn't get it for one reason, it's not his specialty or whatever, we have people we can actually bounce it off of too. So we know, for example, database experts. So if the database doesn't look right, we can have them dig in and really make sure that it's okay. and then give recommendations overall to the application they're building about what changes to make and how they want to shift that. Again, that could be because we have a philosophy of being open, honest, and direct. That can be a very hard conversation at times. And kind of one of the things we do afterwards is really kind of rebuild them in terms of saying, no, it's okay. This is common. We can work through it. It's a problem we can solve. But that's a huge challenge for them.
Yeah. We've worked with a number of companies where we are not coming in at that discovery and ideation phase. Yeah. They already have an MVP. They have a dev team. But they're not sure if what they have is good, to use air quotes, since that has so many meanings, right? So we've come in and say, you know what, can we talk to the dev team? We'd like to understand what's their process? What tools are they using to track their work? How are they doing their quality control? Are they doing quality control for that matter? And yeah, let's dive in. Let's take a look at the code. Do they have, if it's a 10-page mobile app, do they have 10 copies of the same frame instead of putting in abstract frameworks and things like that to really help build out for the future? So you'll see a lot of shops, in order to save time and save money and promise low prices, there's copy and paste, there's hacking things together. It looks good to the client, but internally, it's not going to work long term. So we've come in that phase and can help them understand, are you working with a quality shop who's going to deliver you a quality result?
Yeah, and sometimes we find out that they are quality shops and they are delivering quality results. And we have absolutely no problem working with dev teams that our clients bring on board. We do that all the time. So we're not saying they have to use somebody in our network. We can adjust either way. And with Tim and I both having 20 plus years of experience communicating with dev teams, we know how to do that. And we can help our clients really make sure that they're maximizing the experience and the cost that they're paying towards their dev team and the development functions.
So what happens, when, you've got a dev team, or you've, had dev teams and you need to switch, from one dev team to another because, one is underperforming or, whatever it is. You might be like a quarter way halfway through the build and it's just like, this just isn't doing it for us. What is that process like? Is that something that we should be absolutely terrified about and do our homework ahead of time? Hint, hint. Or is this just kind of a walk in the park?
You really have to consider the cost and where you are in your current delivery cycle. You might have a team that's underperforming, but there is a cost associated with switching. Largely a time cost, also a financial cost that, the ramp up does not happen immediately. So if you're going to pull the rug out from under someone and pass over to a new company, you have to expect that there's going to be an amount of time before they're efficient, and how much time that is depends entirely on the complexity of what's being transitioned. And you might say, okay, they're underperforming. Let me work with the account managers or owners, whatever level of contact you have with that shop, and let's draw to a close. Let's work on a particular release where there's an opportunity for a handoff, close out documentation, make sure there's handover of test plans, of product requirements. There might be exports from project management tools like Jira. So you want to have a delivery package. The ownership of the code that Kelly talked about. A lot of developer shops will work in their own instance of GitHub, for example. And that can be okay. But obviously, if you're going to move to a new team, there needs to be a transition there. And you have to make sure that the rights are there in order to do that. So you have to do a preparation step, find a good place to do a handover, and accept that there is going to be a bit of a ramp up speed for a new team. You have to decide when is the right time to do that. And that can be challenging, especially when you're facing tight deadlines.
Yeah, we talk a lot in our business about risk versus opportunity cost. Every decision you make, regardless of what it is, it could be taking care of your kids and deciding whether or not to have them play video games or go out and about. There's a risk and opportunity cost with that. You could risk, your kids getting addicted to video games, or you can risk not having that really valuable, rich, family experience of going to a museum, for example. There's a risk and opportunity cost for that. There's a risk your kids won't get the knowledge that you could get at a museum. There's also a risk that, the computers they'll get really irritated with the computers. They'll be obsessed with the computers all day. There's an opportunity cost associated with that too. So there's constant balance, and the same thing goes with software dev teams and founders. It's what is the risk of pulling, keeping with the code, keeping where it is, keeping and patching if we need to, or changing or adapting the way they do with it, versus the opportunity cost of maybe needing to move it over so that you have a more quality experience, you have a better financial aspect, those kinds of things. From a business perspective, one of the things we see very often is they prepay for code. They say, we want this application developed, this feature developed, we want it in 3 weeks or 3 months or 4 months or whatever the time frame is. Mm-hmm. And they prepay because the developers say, oh, it'll take N number of hours and it'll be $10,000. Mm-hmm. Well, are you getting what you paid for? Is super important. Is the code even portable? Sometimes the code that's developed isn't quality enough to be able to really move it to another dev team. There's a risk and opportunity cost. If you move it over and don't fix the problems or don't look at it, you're looking at the risk of potentially just duplicating the problems of a different team. There's the risk of the financial hit that comes along. You take a financial risk and that adjusts the second you start moving things. There's also an opportunity cost, though. You get a new dev team to look at it. If you don't have really great foundation and you get a new dev team to look at it, you get a fresh set of eyes, you get a fresh approach, and you avoid that whole blindness factor that comes with you staring at something for so long that you no longer find the faults in it. Mm-hmm. So, but, there's also an opportunity cost associated with that too, because you could be delaying things. You could be putting out a revision to your initial version of it. You can have a proof of concept out there with the original dev team, and then you gut it and redo it, essentially. There's an opportunity cost to that too. Mm-hmm. So you have to really balance that and make those decisions. It's not always just a financial thing. It's not always just a quality thing. Sometimes this is balancing where the problems are going to be and what's going to hit you first.
Good stuff. You had mentioned one of the things that you'd mentioned earlier was about NDA, and you were saying just make sure everybody has NDAs, and in speaking with different founders, we get different opinions. Some people say, oh well, nobody's gonna, some of the bolder ones say, oh, nobody's gonna be able to copy this anyway, blah blah blah. If they want to, if they want to spend $30,000, $50,000, whatever, $100,000, whatever it is. Then, whatever. Other people say, oh, well, everybody has to have an NDA. And then you run into investors or, whomever say, I don't sign NDAs. Give us some insight, give us some wisdom on this.
Yeah, NDAs are kind of, to your point, it's either people love them or hate them or don't find them necessary or do find them necessary. Mm-hmm. We always start with founders with you need to put it in place. If somebody balks on an NDA, you need to be asking them why. NDAs are not complicated things. They really aren't, and they're very traditional, and there's a lot of forms out there, so you don't really have to worry about a complex legal process or anything like that to get them. We have a form that we're more than happy to share with people, and we sign it. We offer to our clients a mutual NDA, and we never balk. If they want us to sign their NDA, great, no problem whatsoever. We look at it, but we don't really ever make changes or anything like that. We're fine with it, and it's one of those things that it covers you if it takes no time to do it, and they don't tend to be negotiated heavily, and they're mutual, so you're covering each other, not just one of you. What's the harm? So it's really it's very standard. Corporate espionage, even on the startup level, is super. It's out there. It's not just a large company kind of thing. It is because you're very often, as a founder, sharing a lot of information about your app. You're talking about it a lot. You talk to the wrong person. You give them the idea that you've got this just kernel of amazing stuff. Without some sort of NDA in place, you have very little recourse when that gets stolen, when that idea goes somewhere else. And you want to make sure you're first to market and it's unique. If you risk that, risk and opportunity cost. Again, you risk your idea is being stolen and having no contractual basis to come after them. The opportunity cost, okay, somebody might say they don't sign an NDA. Whenever somebody does that, a founder comes to us and says they won't sign one, we always go, did you ask them why? Did you challenge them on why? Or did you just accept that answer? And oftentimes they didn't challenge it.
Wow. Tim, any other insights on that? Any thoughts?
Kelly spoke through it pretty well. It's like the founders we work with and all small business owners, they're trying to come up with an app because they believe their idea is unique and special. Why would you not want to try to make sure you protect that?
Yeah.
It seems kind of like a no-brainer. And like Kelly said, they're usually pretty simple. So it seems like a pretty easy decision.
I mean, we even have them with our partners. For example, Epiphany.
Mm-hmm.
Rick, you and I have, you and Seirios and Epiphany have an NDA in place.
Right.
Are we work together, so are we likely to steal ourselves? Highly, highly, highly unlikely, because that damages the relationship. Exactly. But we still have one. Mm-hmm. It's just traditional. It's traditional and can be super valuable, and it does cover you quite a bit usually.
Yeah. I think it's interesting because it's kind of like a level of trust too. It's like, I sign with you saying, hey, I'm committed to this relationship. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And it just makes me feel, confident. It's not like I wouldn't expect you to steal from me or, and vice versa. So, I mean, that's just my take on it.
Yeah, it's a confidence thing to your point. It's a trust thing. It's saying, in some ways, it's a statement of, yes, we trust each other. And yes, it's a contract and all that kind of stuff. But going back to it kind of being traditional in some ways, it is not only do we trust each other, but we're willing to put it on paper that we do. Exactly. That's a huge statement.
It brings a level of comfort into the conversation. Right? If you've got that trust, like if you have a conversation with someone that, we don't really do NDAs, then every time you speak, you're going to be thinking through, okay, what am I about to say? Should I say that? Is it okay if I share that? Just get the NDA out of the way and don't let that put a damper on the conversation. To speak openly and frankly about whatever you're planning to do, whatever the hurdles might be, whatever market research you've already done that might be unique to the solution you're trying to build. You just put everything on the table. If you're holding back while trying to create a new product and you're not sharing, you don't know what you're going to miss that could turn into a real hurdle later on in the process.
Founders are collaborative. I mean, the whole getting the investment process through is a collaborative experience. And if you're constantly worried about filtering yourself, first of all, it's hard to communicate. But also, too, it's really easy to let something slip. Exceedingly easy to let something slip. We're excited about being founders. If you're not enthusiastic about being a founder, you probably don't want to be one. And if you're enthusiastic about it, you're excited about sharing about this amazing thing you're building, this amazing concept you're trying to share with the universe.
Yeah.
It's really easy to talk about it too much if you don't have that kind of situation in place.
Yep. Wow, that's amazing. I always, we have to, as entrepreneurs, as founders, we have to believe in whatever it is we're building. Nobody else is going to believe it if we don't believe it. It's always one of those, is it going to win? Yes, it's going to win. Put the energy behind it.
No, and we did that with Seirios. I mean, we're founders too. We founded Seirios and we are enthusiastic about it. We love sharing what we do and why we do it. And we do feel like we have a unique thing out in the universe. Usually what we do is 3, 4, 5, sometimes 10 different activities and people that you're having to deal with.
Yes.
There aren't many that just do this and make sure that all this stuff is holistically come together. Honestly, I've struggled to find anyone that does all three of those the same way we do.
That's why we wanted to have the company in the first place. So we love the startup space. We love the ideation, taking something cool and unique and clever and making it real. Like, what if we can work with a whole bunch of people who get to do that? So we get to be part of that over and over and over again.
Yeah.
So, and instead of sitting back on, in the large corporate, just answering 300 emails a day and project management world, it's like, no, let's do cool stuff. Let's build solutions that are really going to excite people and make people passionate, because then we also get to work with other passionate people.
Awesome.
So in the ideation process, what are some, in terms of business models, product models, what are some general components you factor in terms of making sure that they are scalable?
A lot of this is choosing the right people. honestly. We like to build things that are scalable. We don't want our startups to get to a certain point and then die off. And
Mm-hmm.
60 to 70%, depending on what stats you look at and who you talk to, of startups fail in the first 5 years.
Yeah.
So scaling is incredibly important, but a lot of that founders don't, from the ideation space, they think about, oh, this is really cool, I want to bring this to market.
Yes.
But they don't think how to manage the growth aspects of it. They don't anticipate when their technology, when their product's going to hit a wall, essentially, and how to get past that wall. They're not thinking in terms of that because they say, oh, I'll deal with that later. I'll deal with that problem later.
Yeah.
Problem is, if you don't think it from the beginning, you're
Yeah.
building a business on quicksand, potentially,
Mm.
where you get to a point where you strip out all your ability to scale by not thinking ahead. Okay, I'm going to, for example, buy a CRM, a content relationship manager or customer relationship manager, or I'm going to buy a financial package.
Mhm.
Well, you need to be looking at, and when am I going to grow out of it? Like, at what point? How many people can I put into it? How many
Yeah.
things can I manage in it before it prevents me from doing what I need to do? That's, you hope you have that problem. That's a really good problem to have.
Mm-hmm.
But you need to make sure you have anticipated how you're going to resolve that. And again, part of the ideation phase is figuring out those points. So, for example, if I'm going to use a financial management system, works great. There are a lot of small business ones out there. You don't have to get a very big, monstrous financial management system to manage a startup with 10 people.
Mhm.
However, when you're 150 people, you better have a really good one. So otherwise, you're going to hit that wall. So what you do is look in that system for, can I export the data? Is it in a reasonable format? Can I get, for example, a CSV of my entire universe out of it? How difficult is it going to be for me to map all the relationships? Can I track my invoices and transfer my invoices over? How can I get information out of the system in order for me to scale? A lot of people don't think about that when they actually acquire or purchase various applications and services. They don't think, what am I going to do when I have the really great problem of suddenly being so big that I'm outgrowing my systems in place?
Yes. Yes.
So we do a lot of work in the ideation phase by saying, okay, so you can go out and do this. Don't go out and buy the really big thing. And we have a lot of experience with the various apps and services that are out there that help startups. We use some of them ourselves. But don't go spending a lot of money in the beginning on something that's too big for you. It doesn't actually solve your problems. But also make sure whatever you're using, that when you get to the big stuff that you need to evolve to, you can map them easily without your data going out the window in the process.
Love it, love it, love it, love it. Talk to us. You've alluded to a number of times, and you mentioned earlier on about the, I guess the roadmap. Talk to us a little bit about that. What kind of what that process looks like. What the reason for it is, and perhaps even what one would expect if doing that with you would look like.
Yeah, it's a very challenging experience, and some of our founders call it exhausting, and it's exhausting for us too. I mean, you're talking about longer meetings. This kind of stuff doesn't happen in a 1-hour meeting. This stuff happens in 3-hour meetings and 4-hour meetings and those kinds of things. And usually we're so excited inside of those meetings that we forget to do things like take breaks and walk away for a minute because they're fun, but they're hard.
Mm-hmm.
Because you are, nobody wants to hear their baby is ugly. Is really kind of the common term for it, because you are saying, you've got these really great ideas. Here's what's practical. Here's what's not. Here's what's going to cost you a lot of money. Here's the interim that won't cost you as much money. And figuring all those things out before you actually set down a formal roadmap. A lot of people, especially if they come out of big technology companies, go straight to the roadmap. They start going ahead and documenting things. They dump everything into a system like Jira, which is a very common development tool and project management tool. They'll go ahead and do that, but there's a bunch of missing items, and there's a bunch of things that haven't been rationalized, and a bunch of things that haven't really been looked at strictly, and they end up in chaos, basically. And so because they went straight to the formal road mapping, they went to traditional technology road mapping, which is figuring out releases and intervals and sprints and all those kinds of things.
Mm-hmm.
That's a huge, even though the time is intense and the process is intense of going through that ideation and figuring out your personas and taking your ideas and putting them all together and challenging whether there's a market fit. and adapting the market fit. I have one client right now was going in one direction, had a technological block they hit, needed to re-ideate, but was going ideation, something that like paralleled something that was already in the market. That doesn't make sense. So let's work on figuring out how to make that unique. Those are the conversations we have during that ideation phase, and we really make sure all of that is really done, and we've extracted it and gone to a point where we're like, okay, this is the plan. Then you start that road mapping and figuring out what needs to happen so you can map it like tools efficiently, so you can figure out the language compatibility, so you can bring the right people to bear. So you can ask, the founder can ask the right questions of whether or not something's rational. And we guide them through that process, but it's hard, which is one of the reasons people skip it. It's really super intense. It also, you challenge the observational bias. Kind of going back to the baby is ugly. Everybody thinks their baby is gorgeous. They aren't always. And so, and that's an observational bias. You're looking at something and interpreting it through your eyes because you've seen it a million times and you want to make it look, you want to know it's good. You want to make it beautiful. You want it to be beautiful. Reality is, it often isn't. And so during the ideation phase, we filter that out and figure out like how to make it a beautiful thing that's unique in the universe and help them not make mistakes on the way.
Awesome. Anything you want to add to that, Tim?
No, I don't think so. I think I covered it.
Awesome.
Products, that's my thing. That's where I think I got into this, or we started this company because I like building things. I like building products. Tim does the tech side of it. He does the technology and figures out all those kinds of details. But product development and product building is like what I'm super passionate about. And one of the reasons why we started this company is because I tired of doing it for other people.
That's awesome. That's awesome. They're your superpowers, guys. This has been great. We do need to wrap up. Is there anything you want to say to like any of the founders out there that are, in whichever stage of development they might be in?
I would say that have fun with it, right? And that's what we're doing, and we want to help other people have fun with their projects. And make them successful. And you need both. If you're jumping into something that's just going to be a slog and you're not having fun, that itself puts the project at risk. So try to have fun with it. Do what you're passionate about, and that's what really makes it worthwhile, enjoyable, and successful.
Love it. Kelly, what about you? Anything you want to leave our audience with?
I feel like I've talked a lot. So, really kind of feeding on Tim's comment too, it's if you don't feel really, really intensely attached to what you're trying to do, if you don't think you're putting a star out in the universe and contributing to the world at large, you might want to question why you're doing it. But also too, be gentle with yourself. This is a crazy business. It's a crazy process. Yes. Be gentle and kind to yourself. Accept that you're going to fail over and over again, and that's okay. You don't fail, you don't learn anything. You don't have the ability to iterate and build on your ideas. So be okay with failure. Accept that that's a normal part of life and a normal part of business, and have the energy and enthusiasm to drive through it. There will be a million times where you question yourself and say, why on earth am I putting myself through this? But think about it. This is where you got to, really think about what you want to do and poke holes in it. Be that person who shops it out there and says, what do you think? It doesn't have to be with us, but just make sure you're doing it on your own. You're really being honest with yourself about what it's going to take and whether or not you're ready for it, so that you can get through it successfully and not be one of those 60% of companies or startups that fail in the first 5 years.
Oh Lord, yes. Cool. Awesome. If anyone wants to reach out to you, any founders or whomever else want to reach out to you, what's the best way to do that?
You can go through our website. Keep in mind, we're actually redesigning it ourselves because we're iterating, just like everybody else should in a startup environment. We're doing it also. But there's a form on your website. Schedule some time on my calendar. It goes directly to me. Schedule some of my time. Drop us an email. We're Kelly at Seirios Technologies and Tim at Seirios Technologies. Easy to remember. And reach out. Get to Rick. Rick can figure out how to contact us. He knows how to do that. He knows I answer his emails pretty much immediately. So talk to Rick if you have that contact. Look us up on LinkedIn and go through that direction. We really try to make sure that there's a lot of avenues for people to find us. And, we don't charge, just ask a question. We're more than happy to get on a call and give a little bit of free advice because we see this as a contribution to the community. So please feel free to find us.
Beautiful. Love it. Love it. Hazel, anything you want to leave us with?
No, I'm good.
All right. Cool. Tim, Kelly, thank you so much for being on the show. Loved having you. Hazel, love seeing you as always. Folks, thanks for watching another episode of Epiphany Off the Cuff. We look forward to seeing you next time. Take care. Thanks for watching another episode of Epiphany Off the Cuff. Please make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you know when the next episode is going to drop. And don't forget, we're on podcasts as well, so you can catch us on your favorite podcasting platforms. We look forward to seeing you on the next episode of Epiphany Off the Cuff.